Picture this. It's a Saturday morning straight out of a postcard. The sun's shining bright, casting a golden glow over my suburban street in Willow Creek. The grass smells freshly cut, birds are chirping, and I'm out front watering my daisies, just soaking in the calm that comes with a quiet weekend. It's the kind of day where you'd expect nothing but peace, maybe a neighbor waving hello, or kids riding bikes down the cul-de-sac. I'm in my happy place, humming a tune, thinking about firing up the grill later, until whoop whoop, the piercing sound of police sirens cuts through the air like a knife. I look up, and my jaw drops. 2 cop cars are parked right outside my house, their lights flashing like it's a full-blown crime scene. My neighbors peek out from behind their curtains, probably wondering if I'm secretly running a drug cartel out of my garage. 2 officers step out, looking way too serious for a weekend morning, and march up to my door. "Sir, we've got a complaint about disturbing the peace," one says, holding up a report. I'm standing there, hose in hand, water dripping down my sneakers, completely dumbfounded. "Disturbing the peace? I'm watering my flowers." He nods, almost embarrassed, and says, "It's an HOA violation, watering during quiet hours." I glance at the complaint, and there's Karen's name in bold. Karen Whitaker, the HOA president who thinks she's the queen of the cul-de-sac, ruling with an iron clipboard. But here's the twist that'll blow your mind. Karen didn't just call the cops on any random neighbor. She called them on me, the police chief of this town. I've spent 25 years locking up actual criminals, facing down armed robbers, and defusing hostage situations, and now I'm the bad guy for gardening? I couldn't help but laugh as the officers shuffled awkwardly. "Chief, what do we do?" one whispered. I grinned. "Tell Karen to take it up with me at the station." "Oh Karen, you've just started a war you can't win." What happens when a nosy HOA queen picks a fight with the top cop? Stick around, this story's about to get juicy, and I promise, you won't believe how it ends. Let me introduce you to Jack Thompson, a man who's seen more action than most Hollywood heroes. For 25 years, he's been on the police force, including a decade in SWAT, where he kicked down doors, faced off against armed robbers, and defused high-stakes standoffs with nothing but grit and a cool head. Now at 50, he's the police chief of Willow Creek, a quaint little suburb where the biggest crime is usually a teenager sneaking out past curfew. Jack moved here after losing his wife 4 years ago, leaving him to raise his 12-year-old daughter, Emily, on his own. He wanted a fresh start, a safe place where Emily could grow up without the shadow of his dangerous past, where he could trade his bulletproof vest for a pair of gardening gloves, and finally be the dad she deserved, not just a cop always on call. Willow Creek seemed like the perfect spot. Tree-lined streets, kids playing in sprinklers, neighbors who'd wave hello with a smile. It was the kind of place where you'd expect to see a 4th of July parade straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting. But there was one major problem. Karen Whitaker, the HOA president who acted like she was running a military dictatorship. Karen had a rule for everything. Your grass couldn't be taller than 2 inches, your mailbox couldn't be too reflective, and don't even think about lighting a scented candle. It might disrupt the neighborhood's energy. Jack got his first taste of her nonsense just days after moving in. A fine for his overly festive porch swing, followed by warnings about his unauthorized flower pots and excessive Christmas lights last winter. Karen patrolled the block like a hawk, clipboard in hand, ready to slap you with a fine if your trash can was an inch out of place. Jack just wanted to live quietly, maybe grill some burgers on the weekend, but Karen saw his laid-back vibe as a direct challenge to her authority. When he skipped her mandatory new resident meeting, he was busy running a police department. She took it personally. To her, Jack was a threat to her power. She had no idea who she was messing with, but she was about to find out the hard way. The trouble started on a random Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where nothing should go wrong. Jack was out in his front yard, fixing a leaky garden hose, the sun beating down as he wrestled with the nozzle, sweat dripping down his forehead. He'd turned on his old radio, tuned to a sports talk show debating the Lakers' latest game, the volume low enough that you'd barely hear it from the sidewalk. It was more background noise than anything else. It was the middle of the day, hardly the time for anyone to complain about noise, especially in a neighborhood as quiet as Willow Creek. But then, like a tornado in yoga pants, Karen storms across the street, phone in hand, filming him like she's auditioning for a reality TV show. "You're breaking HOA noise rules," she screeches, her voice loud enough to scare the birds out of the trees and make the squirrels scatter. "That radio's a disturbance. You owe a $500 fine, right now." Jack looks up, wiping sweat off his brow, and can't help but chuckle, thinking she's got to be joking. "Karen, it's a radio, not a rock concert. Can we calm down a bit?" But Karen doesn't do calm. She plants herself in front of him, hands on hips, her clipboard trembling with rage as she glares at him like he's just committed a felony. "Pay the fine, or I'm calling the authorities," she snaps, her eyes flashing with the kind of fury you'd expect from someone who'd caught you stealing her prized roses. Jack, still trying to be the nice guy, shrugs casually. "I'm the police chief, Karen. I'm pretty sure I'm not breaking any laws." Her eyes narrow. She takes it as a personal insult, her face turning red with indignation. "Oh, you think you're above the rules because you're a cop?" she hisses, her voice dripping with disdain. Before Jack can even respond, she's on the phone with 911, putting on a performance that could win her an Oscar for Best Dramatic Actress. "I need officers immediately," she cries, her voice shaking with fake panic. "This man is aggressive and possibly dangerous. He's threatening me." Jack just stands there, hose still dripping onto his sneakers, watching her act like he's about to pull a weapon from his toolbox. Aggressive? He hasn't even raised his voice. But Karen's call sets off a chain of events she never could have predicted. What happens when you call the cops on the guy who is the cops? Things are about to get hilariously awkward, and Karen's about to learn a lesson she'll never forget. This is just the beginning of a showdown that'll have the whole neighborhood talking. Karen's dramatic 911 call turned Willow Creek into a circus faster than you can say suburban drama. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers rolled up to Jack's house, their lights flashing like it was a scene from a cop show, drawing every neighbor's attention. Curtains parted, and heads poked out of windows. Some folks even stepped onto their porches, clutching their coffee mugs, whispering to each other about what could possibly be going down at the new guy's place. Jack was still standing there, hose in hand, the radio now off, as 2 young officers, Officers Ramirez and Hayes, stepped out of their cars. They looked uncomfortable, their faces a mix of confusion and embarrassment as they approached. "Chief Thompson?" Ramirez said, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. "We got a call about a disturbance, something about noise and threat." Jack smirked, nodding toward Karen, who was standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed, looking like she'd just won a reality TV challenge. "You'll have to ask her," Jack said, his voice dripping with amusement, barely holding back a laugh. The officers turned to Karen, who immediately launched into her tirade, her voice shrill enough to make the dogs down the street start barking in protest. "He's been playing that radio all day, disrupting the peace," she shrieked, pointing at Jack like he was a wanted criminal on a most wanted poster. "When I confronted him, he threatened me. He's a menace to this community." Hayes raised an eyebrow, glancing at Jack, who was still holding a dripping hose and looking about as threatening as a golden retriever puppy. "Threatened you?" Hayes asked, trying to keep a straight face, his lips twitching with the effort. Jack snorted, shaking his head. "Yeah, with a garden hose. I'm a real danger to society." The officers exchanged a look, clearly struggling not to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. They'd seen Jack take down armed robbers, and now he was a menace for listening to a sports talk show. They tried to explain to Karen that they couldn't exactly arrest their own boss over a radio that was barely audible, but she wasn't having it. "I demand you do something," she screeched, stomping her foot like a toddler throwing a tantrum in the middle of a grocery store. Ramirez, ever the diplomat, attempted to reason with her. "Ma'am, maybe you can file a formal complaint with the HOA board?" he suggested, his voice as gentle as possible. That only made Karen angrier. She stormed off, yelling over her shoulder, "This isn't over. You'll hear from the city council. I'll make sure of it." And true to her word, she didn't let it go. The next day, Karen filed an official complaint with the city, claiming Jack was abusing his authority by refusing to pay her fines. She twisted the story, making it sound like Jack was some rogue cop who thought he was above the law, terrorizing the neighborhood with his radio and garden hose. Then she took it a step further. She sent anonymous emails to the local news, with headlines straight out of a tabloid. "Police chief ignores HOA rules. Is he fit to lead?" Jack's quiet life was about to get a whole lot louder. Just when Jack thought this HOA drama couldn't get any more absurd, he decided to channel his inner detective and dig deeper. Late one night, after tucking Emily into bed, he brewed a strong cup of coffee and sat down at his kitchen table, pulling out his laptop and a stack of HOA documents he'd requested from the city. He started combing through everything, every fine, every rule, every passive-aggressive email Karen had sent to the neighborhood over the past few years, looking for anything that didn't add up. What he found wasn't just petty nonsense, it was outright illegal, the kind of thing that could land someone in serious trouble. Turns out, Karen wasn't even the legitimate HOA president. She'd self-appointed herself 3 years ago, forging signatures on official documents to create a new set of bylaws that gave her total control over Willow Creek. She'd turned the neighborhood into her personal kingdom, a suburban dictatorship where she could fine people for the smallest infractions, and no one had dared to question her. until now. But that wasn't the worst of it. Jack dug deeper, pulling up public records from Karen's past, his years as a cop giving him the know-how to find what others might miss. What he discovered made his jaw drop. In her last neighborhood, Oakville, she'd been sued for the exact same thing, faking HOA authority, harassing residents with ridiculous fines, and even threatening witnesses to get the case dropped. She'd slithered away scot-free back then, likely because people were too scared to testify against her, but her past was catching up fast, and Jack had the evidence to prove it. Jack's blood boiled as he pieced it together. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about justice for the entire neighborhood. Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor with a clipboard. She was a fraud who'd been terrorizing Willow Creek for years. Families had paid thousands in fake fines, lived in constant fear of her wrath, and some had even moved away because of her relentless bullying. Jack thought about Emily, about the kind of neighborhood he wanted her to grow up in. A place where kids could play without being fined for chalk drawings on the driveway, where people weren't scared to put up a Christmas wreath because it might be too festive. He couldn't let this stand. As police chief, he'd sworn to protect his community, and that didn't stop at crime scenes. It extended to his own street, to the people he saw every day. So Jack made a decision. He wasn't just going to defend himself. He was going to take Karen down and free Willow Creek from her reign of terror once and for all. The stage was set for an epic showdown that would change the neighborhood forever. The big moment arrived at an emergency. HOA meeting Karen called in the Willow Creek Community Center, and the tension was thicker than a summer fog. The room was packed to the brim, neighbors crammed into folding chairs, some standing in the back, others spilling into the hallway, all buzzing with anticipation over what was about to go down. Karen took the stage, her usual props in hand, a gavel, a stack of papers, and a smug grin that could make your skin crawl. She banged the gavel like she was a judge on a TV drama, her voice booming through the microphone as she addressed the crowd. "Tonight, we're voting to evict Jack Thompson from Willow Creek," she declared, pointing at him with a dramatic flourish, like he was a villain in a Lifetime movie. "He's refused to follow our rules, disrespected our community, and threatened our harmony with his reckless behavior." The crowd murmured, some nodding along. Karen had them wrapped around her finger, or so she thought. But Jack, he sat there in the front row, calm as a summer breeze, waiting for his moment to strike. Then he stood up, holding a thick folder of evidence, his presence commanding the room's attention like only a seasoned cop could. "Karen, let's talk about your rules," he said, his voice steady but firm, cutting through the tension like a knife. He started laying it all out, the forged signatures on the HOA bylaws, the fake emails she'd sent to the city to justify her fines, even the doctored videos she'd used to prove his violations, which he'd gotten a tech-savvy neighbor to analyze. Gasps rippled through the room as Jack projected screenshots on a screen. Karen's own words, twisted lies, and illegal schemes, all exposed for everyone to see in black and white. Behind him stood the city lawyer, a group of fed-up residents who'd joined his cause, and two of his officers in uniform, arms crossed, staring Karen down with stone-cold expressions. The room went dead silent, the air thick with shock. Karen's face turned beet red as she stammered. This is slander. I'm the president. I make the rules." But the more she talked, the deeper she dug her own grave, admitting to things she couldn't take back, like how she'd handled the fines herself. The crowd erupted, some shouting in anger, others cheering for Jack. "You've been lying to us," one neighbor yelled, standing up. "How much money did you steal from us?" another demanded, her voice trembling with rage. Karen's empire crumbled right there, in front of the very people she'd controlled for years. She'd picked a fight with the wrong guy, and now, she was facing the consequences of her own actions. The city lawyer stepped forward, his tone official. "Ms. Whitaker, you're under investigation for fraud and embezzlement," he said, as the crowd roared in approval. Jack looked at Karen, his expression calm but firm. "You should have left the hose alone," he said, his words echoing through the room. With Karen's schemes laid bare, the fallout was swift and brutal, like a house of cards collapsing in a storm. The city launched a full investigation into her actions, uncovering a laundry list of charges: abuse of power, falsifying documents, embezzlement, and even threatening a public official, Jack himself, after she'd tried to intimidate him into dropping the case by leaving menacing voicemails. Karen's days of playing HOA dictator were over, and she knew it. The local news, which had once hounded Jack with headlines like "Police Chief Ignores Rules," did a complete 180 overnight. Now the stories read, "HOA Fraud Exposed, Police Chief Clears Name, Saves Neighborhood." Reporters swarmed Willow Creek, but this time, they were on Jack's side, interviewing residents who shared years of horror stories about Karen's reign. Fines for kids' lemonade stands, threats over Christmas lights, even a family who'd been driven out for refusing to pay her special assessment fees. One neighbor tearfully told a reporter, "We were scared of her. Jack gave us our freedom back. The neighborhood came together in a way Karen never could have predicted. Residents filed a petition to dissolve the HOA entirely, replacing it with a new, fair board elected by the community. No more petty tyrants allowed. Willow Creek was done with clipboard queens. Jack, who'd only wanted a quiet life for him and Emily, became the local hero overnight. Neighbors who'd once whispered behind his back now stopped by with homemade cookies, pies, and heartfelt thank yous for standing up to Karen. "You gave us our neighborhood back," one said, her voice cracking with emotion. For Jack, hearing that meant more than any badge or promotion ever could. Karen, meanwhile, quietly put her house up for sale and slipped away, her reign of terror finally over, leaving behind a community that was stronger than ever, ready to rebuild without her shadow looming over them. A few months later, Karen was long gone, her reign a distant memory that the neighborhood was happy to forget. A for sale sign stood where her lawn chair of judgment once sat, her house empty as she disappeared into the night, likely off to torment some other unsuspecting community far away. Willow Creek, though, was free at last. The residents threw a HOA freedom party in the park to celebrate. Kids ran around with water balloons, music blasted from a speaker, and neighbors swapped stories over burgers, hot dogs, and lemonade. For the first time in years, the cul-de-sac felt like a real community, not a battleground ruled by fear and fines. Jack stood there, watching Emily laugh as she played tag with her friends, her smile brighter than the summer sun. He'd come to this neighborhood for peace, and now he finally had it, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd suffered under Karen's rule. The real win, though, was seeing Emily's pride in him. She'd watched her dad go from being the bad guy in the news to the hero who stood up for what was right. "You're not just a police chief, Dad," she said, wrapping her arms around him in a tight hug. "You're our police chief." Jack knew then that justice still had a voice, even in the quietest suburbs. He'd protected his community, not just from criminals, but from petty tyrants like Karen who thought they could bully their way to power. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest battles make the biggest difference. Have you ever dealt with a Karen who thought she ran the show, only to crash and burn spectacularly? Drop your stories below. I'd love to hear them and laugh along with you. If this epic takedown of HOA Karen had you laughing, cheering, or shaking your head in disbelief, smash that like button and share this video with anyone who's ever survived a nosy neighbor or crazy HOA. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss more stories packed with laughs, plot twists, and sweet, sweet petty revenge. Your support keeps these wild tales coming, so let's keep the community growing stronger together. Comment below. What's the pettiest thing an HOA or neighbor ever pulled on you? Did they fine you for your grass being too green? Or maybe your dog barked too loud on a Tuesday? Let's spill the tea together. I can't wait to read your stories and share a good laugh over the madness.